Hello and welcome to This Is What Came Out of Me, a series about anything and everything, but mostly movies, TV, books, podcasts and YouTube. In each episode I talk about things that have grabbed my interest and things that I think that you out there in the big wide world might be interested in. I'm Sierra Kilo Bravo, let's get into it. I've got a book review for you today. This book was recommended by Jordan Peterson on the Jocko podcast in recent times. It's written by Christopher Browning and is called Ordinary Men and charts the events of Reserve Police Battalion 101 and their involvement in Hitler's final solution during World War II. Ordinary Men is really a perfect title because these men were literally truck drivers, dock workers and tradesmen. The book aims to answer the question of how such ordinary men could become mass murderers. It opens by describing some of the work done by police units as part of the rounding up and execution of the Jews, and then zooms in and focuses on one battalion, the Reserve Battalion 101 of the title. It was made up of under 500 men who were ultimately responsible for the death of 38,000 Jews. The police units were not made up of soldiers and were not actual police in the form that you would naturally think of, and initially they were deployed just to keep order in areas where the army had moved through and conquered. This is why they were called the Order Police. As the war went on though, and more manpower was needed at the front, that scope of tasks of the Order Police widened. An incredible amount of research has gone into this book, right down to which companies in the battalion were where and what they were assigned to do. What struck me early on was that it was clear that many in the group had a conscience, including one of the commanders, a man by the name of Major Trapp. In the first operation they were involved in, when Trapp assembled the company, he said that any who did not feel up to it could step out. A number of them did, and a number more requested to be pulled out once the massacre started, and they realised the scale and brutality of what it was they had been tasked to do. So for me, it was, for want of a better word, good that some stepped out. They showed at least some form of conscience. Of course, 1,500 Jews were killed in that action, so there was still plenty of police still willing to walk one-on-one with their prisoner to a designated spot in the forest, make them lie down, and pull the trigger. And among the ones that first participated in the shootings, but who later pulled out, it was made clear in later interrogations that the men pulled out due to physical revulsion and not any political or ethical motivation. The book, as you might have guessed, is very dark and doesn't spare details of what went on. In some ways, it reminded me of the book Hellstorm that I recently read. What we see as the war and assignments go on is a gradual change among the men. While there are still pockets of resistance, as time went by, the work took over and the process of arriving in a town, rounding up the Jews to the marketplace, shooting on the spot those that couldn't march, marching the rest to a forest for execution, became commonplace. So much so that when one company chief had regular stomach cramps that always coincided with an operation, resentment and backtalk set in amongst the men. And that's the underlying subtext of this book. It's not just an account of atrocities, but it's an examination of the human psyche. It makes you ask questions. What motivates people who initially resisted to eventually participate to the point where they resented those that didn't? Was it a case of, I hate this, but I have to do it? And I'll do it, but only in solidarity of my fellow soldiers so we can get through this? To the point where their initial revulsion morphed into numbness. As I'm thinking about this, I'm really struggling to put it all into words. I'd like to think that if I was put in that situation, I would find some way out of it. But when you're a soldier or a policeman under orders, do you really have that luxury? If it comes down to you shooting others or you being shot yourself, what would you choose? It's a hard and conflicting read, but when you pay attention to the subtext, it's one that really gets your brain working. Sitting in our relatively safe environments now, can we really understand what it would have been like to be there? This book really messes with you. Would I recommend it? Yes, absolutely I would. As you've probably gathered, it's not an easy book to get through, but it really gets you going on all those questions of what if. That's Ordinary Men, written by Christopher Browning. That's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. Please check out the notes for a link to some details about Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning. Until next time,
excellent to each other.
I'm Sierra Kilo Bravo, and this is what came out of me.